I was an FBI hostage negotiator. I was the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator, and one of the few things that we want to live by in negotiations is never split the difference. If I've got two hostages inside a bank, the negotiator can't say, well, look, we'll split the difference. I'll take one. We'll call it a day. A hostage negotiator starts from the beginning knowing that we're all driven by emotions and navigates with emotional intelligence tools. One of the top strategies in negotiating, let the other side go first. Many people want to go first, but it's not a good idea. Another top strategy is then when you talk, you really want to get the other person to say that's right. When someone says you're right, they actually want you to stop talking, and they really probably want you to go away. One of the things that was the most surprising, we really don't try to get people to say yes. Something happens when someone says no. They have a tendency to relax. In many cases, they're more interested in listening. My company is the Black Swan Group. A black swan is something very subtle, seemingly very small, that has a massive impact. Don't be afraid of the negativity that the other person feels about you. Simply recognizing it has a tendency to make it go away. In a hostage negotiation, we have a calming, soothing voice. Before I've even finished a sentence, I've actually made a difference in how you feel about the interaction and me, and made you more likely to make a deal with me. And that's a little thing. It's a small, soft skill that has a massive difference.
So one of the reasons actually I want to play that video too is it's hard to tell, fortunately, because of the lighting, but my eyes were bloodshot red. I had a raging hangover when we shot that. I had gone to New York. We set up this elaborate trip. HarperCollins is going to shoot a video trailer. They got a studio. They set aside this time. And I don't know how it got in my head, but the night before I'd completely forgotten that I was doing this the next day. And I catch up with a couple of former New York law enforcement guys. I ended up in a bar. I'm with the former head of security for the United Nations, the former head of counterterrorism for New York, and the former head of the DEA in New York. And I'm thinking, I don't got to get up in the morning. We start knocking them back. And I wake up in time in the morning. I got a raging hangover. And people are calling me because I'm already late showing up. But at that point in time, I had learned the benefits of cold water therapy, and they got cold water in New York, and a 20-minute cold shower, and I showed up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, other than red-eyed, to do that video. So it's one of the things that I like about that video. They were very kind to me, too. Nobody yelled at me. All right, so talk a little bit about what I've learned about negotiation and how it could work for you. If you're on Instagram, hit me up on Instagram. I like that a lot, and that's what it is. Some of you that are taking pictures today, let's show each other some love on Instagram. All right, so what superhero did you want to be when you were little? Superman, huh? Wonder Woman. What, Thor? Thor always made his dad mad, right? His dad was always mad at him. What else? What superhero did you want to be? Yeah, I'm rich, right? I can tell you something. I want to be Batman. I want to be Batman growing up, right? My mom, back in when I grew up, stay-at-home mom. I remember she got one of those to this local sewing store. I lived in a small town in Iowa. She got a pattern to make a Batman hood and a cape, and she made that for me. I'd run around the yard in my little Batman hood and cape. But, as an adult, it's a little problematic because, sort of imagine what would Batman's dating profile look like? Wears a mask, has issues. So instead of becoming a superhero, I became an FBI agent. I became actually a hostage negotiator with the FBI, and then I became the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator. Now, what did that mean? Any American got grabbed anywhere in the world, it was my job to come up with a negotiation strategy that got them out. And ultimately, when I first started doing it, it wasn't by presidential order, but it ultimately became a presidential order that was signed in 2002 that the FBI had to lead on negotiation strategy, and that's one of the few things that has survived all presidential administrations, actually to this day. Bush 43 originally signed it and survived through his second term, through all the Obama administration, and is even still in place in the Trump administration. Probably one of the only presidential directives that has lasted that long, because the different nuances of it make that much sense. And also to draw a distinction, it's not somebody gets grabbed hiking in North Korea. That's the State Department. Somebody gets grabbed by the government in Iran. That's the State Department. That's not the FBI. Terrorists and criminals are the only ones that I would deal with. Criminal organizations, terrorist organizations, grab you, a member of your family. So you might ask yourself, I mean, how often is the FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator busy? Well, it's a big world, and there are a lot of Americans doing stupid stuff. So at any given moment, anywhere from 1 to 4 Americans somewhere being held by somebody. Now, interestingly enough, I came to learn that kidnapping was a business, and the other side operates it as a business. And one of the keys to negotiation is always, it doesn't matter what it is to you. It doesn't matter. What is it to the other side? It's a business to the other side. And in most kidnapping businesses, they don't grab Americans on purpose. It's a commodities business. An American is a bad commodity. Because if you grab an American, then Uncle Sam is going to show up and get in everybody's business, and nobody likes that. So by and large, when they're grabbing Americans, they're grabbing them by accident. Now, how does that happen? How do you grab an American by accident? Here's how. How did you get your citizenship? You were born here. How did you get your citizenship? Anywhere in the world?
Germany.
Okay.
By birth.
No, you didn't. But by birth, by what definition? You don't know. One of the things that I'm an unabashed patriot, fan of the United States. I consider myself apolitical, regardless of the president. There's some stuff that I say that they do that I think is stupid, and stuff that they do that I like. This president is no different. The previous president was no different. In support of some, other stuff not. So one of the things that I'm such a fan about the United States of America is, how many countries in the world are you a citizen of if you're born in that country? Your German citizenship is based on your parentage, not on the fact that you were born in Germany. Germany is, by the way, one of those. There's not one country in Western Europe that gives, I think the Latin term is jus soli, which is right of the soil. How many countries in the world, if you're born in that country, are you a citizen of that country? Any idea? I grew up in Iowa. And I just assume I'm born in the United States, and the natural order of things, it's natural law, it must be that way everywhere. It's argued that there are only 2 developed nations in the world, the US and Canada. And you start using the term developed nation, and you sort of get into all sort of, how fair is that term anyway? As it turns out, it's an idea of the Americas. Most of the countries in North and South America, if you're born in that country, they believe that for whatever reason, if you happen to be, when you are your first day on a planet, if you're born in that country, you get to be a citizen of that country. It's called right of the soil, jus soli. And it's not a common law, English common law idea. It's not the case in England. It's not the case in Australia, not Western Europe. Most of the countries in the U.S., in North and South America, which is how we're working kidnappings. In this particular place, a kidnapping that I'm getting ready to tell you about, a 12-year-old boy gets grabbed in Haiti. He's an American citizen. Nobody else in his family is. Think about the privileges that are conferred on you at birth if you're born an American. I mean, there's a reason we're even talking about a wall in this country. In point of fact, the streets are paved with gold here. You NFL players that are from Africa. I remember there was one of the defensive ends whose name escapes me at the moment, for the New York Giants a few years ago. Born and grew up in Africa. His family lived in Africa. When they came to visit him in the United States, he would say stuff to them like, "We have paved sidewalks all the way up to our houses." And his family would go like, "No." I mean, what we take for granted in this country is enormous. And so being born here is a phenomenal privilege. What does it have to do with the kidnapping in Haiti? Haitian moms know that one way or another, the best gift they could possibly give their child on their child's literal first birthday is a gift of American citizenship. So illegal or legally, they're finding their way onto American soil so the children will be born American citizens. And Haiti has turned, at this point in time, before the earthquake in Haiti, has turned into a revolving door of kidnappings. We're working multiple kidnappings each and every week. And I remember somebody in the media asked me, how is it possible this is not hitting the media? That's a simple answer. What's the number one rule whether or not something hits the media? If it bleeds, it leads. If it bleeds, it leads. People are not getting killed. We're doing our job in Haiti. And since they're not getting shot, it's not sexy enough to make the news. And we got a revolving door of kidnappings. Now, I will tell you, at the time, I was impressed with the business model in Haiti. And when I first learned kidnapping, when I first became aware of the fact that it was just a business, was when I went in for the kidnap negotiation training. I assumed they're gonna, I'm gonna learn magic spells. They're gonna show me the secret handshake and whatever kind of voodoo that we're gonna learn to work kidnappings. And the guy who was a friend and a mentor stood up in front of us and said, whatever country you're in, you need to, when you get there, you need to talk to, and he designated the people to talk to with the State Department and other aspects of the United States government. He says, you're gonna find out there's an opening demand to be expected, and there's a percentage of that demand they are going to expect to settle at, and there's gonna be an amount of time that they expect the kidnapping to take every time. And you find that out and you'll be able to lay out the parameters of the kidnapping. What does that sound like? The market. That's a market. And the market, the commodity happen to be human beings, which is horrifying to us, but to them, it's another day on the job. And they got a division of labor, just like any other business. They have people that acquire the commodity. They have people that transport the commodity. They have people that house the commodity. They have people that negotiate to transfer the commodity to a buyer. And they have a boss that watches what everybody does and complains about his employees. It's another day at work. Commodity happens to be human beings, but again, it doesn't, any given negotiation, it's not what it is to you. It's what is it to the other side. Now, the business model in Haiti at the time, I gotta tell you, I was impressed with. Carjack a car with more than one person in it. Let one of those two people go. You just handled your marketing. They knew each other well enough. You don't have to go out and look for your client. The client has been marketed to already. They are engaged. Your funnel is really nice and streamlined. You've pre-qualified your client. They got money for a car and gas in Haiti, a ridiculously poor country. They got money for ransom. So they're pre-qualified. And the best part of it all, this is the part that I was really blown away with how smart this was. What happens if you grab the one person in the family that nobody likes? You got a car. You're gonna get paid. It's beautiful. So very impressive business model. They're rocking and rolling. We understand the parameters. So 12-year-old boy gets grabbed. 12-year-old boy was in a car that got carjacked. Nobody else in his family is an American citizen. His father knows that his son is an American citizen, and when Americans get grabbed, the U.S. is supposed to help them. And so he goes to the State Department and he says, my son's an American citizen, he's been kidnapped. And they say, the FBI is gonna be there to help you. Now, pause for a moment and ask yourself, if somebody said to you, the FBI will be there to help you, what might you imagine would happen next? I'm not sure what went through this guy's mind, but I can imagine he probably thought something to the effect of about 15 minutes later, he's going to hear on the front door, and these guys will be there. Maybe he might have FBI hats on. But instead, about 15 minutes later, he gets a call from some guy in Washington, D.C. named Voss, and he literally says to me on the phone, "You're in Washington, D.C., how you gonna help me?" You're me, what do you say? Seriously. How much time before he hangs up? You're me, what do you say? And in your world, isn't this the same thing that everybody that you engage with on a business level says to themselves about you when you try to engage them? How are you going to help me? What's the data on how long you have to make a first impression? 7 to 10 seconds. Same amount of time as me with this father. What do you have to establish in the first 7 to 10 seconds of a business interaction in order to continue? Trust and competence. Trust and exactly. Expertise, trust and competence. Credibility is another word. Not confidence, by the way. They want you to be confident. But I was at a talk recently and somebody said, would you rather have a competent plumber or a confident plumber? Yeah, I fixed the leak. Don't bother turning on the water till I leave. Trust and competence. 7 to 10 seconds. Same thing. How do you do it? You got the same parameters that I had. Exactly the same. There is no difference in that dynamic. They may not hang up on you physically, literally, as quickly, but you got 7 seconds before the other person hangs up on you anyway. What do you say to establish trust and competence in 7 to 10 seconds? Harold. I'm going to get your son. We just burned up 3 seconds. How do I know you're going to get my son? How many people say that? Right. Yeah. So you're on the right track. You're trying to find a way to display. Okay, really? How many times have you done it? We're out. You begin to see how this exchange takes us outside the 7 seconds as we keep going. And that's assuming that the other person's actually listening and that they're dialed in. Ask a question. What kind of a question? What question?
It's either that or make a statement.
Oh, now you're wafting on me. Ask them the question, what's your other option? I already don't think you're an option. So my other option is to hang up on you and find out what my other options are. I have a team already there. We'll get your son back in a certain amount of time. You have to trust me, but I haven't established trust. So what's caused them to think that I know what I'm talking about? Everybody that you encounter in the business world, do you trust them based on their position? No. I'm talking about you. He already said you're in Washington. He knew I was an FBI agent to start with. This conversation starts because I call him. He doesn't call me. Here's the interesting thing, and some of the approaches, in order to get something through somebody's head by telling them, our parents say, I told you 2 times, I told you 3 times, why don't you understand? You know how many times you got to tell somebody something to get it through their head? 19. 19 times. That's assuming that they're listening all 19 times. Because telling someone something, their brain is in a passive mode. They're not processing. And if they haven't taught, the whole issue of active listening to begin with was to get people to kick their brains into gear and process what they were hearing. Because by and large, when we're in a sedentary listening state, we don't process well. We have to be told something 19 times for it to get through our head. Now, there are some aspects of instruction, like when my company, when we're teaching people, there are certain things that through the course of the day, we're going to repeat 19 times. But that's only because you're going to be with us for 8 hours and we got time to repeat it 19 times. And in the meantime, we're going to be doing a lot of stuff to keep your attention anyway. But in the initial 7 to 10 seconds, I don't have time to say anything to them 19 times because it's going to have to be said to them 19 times before it gets into their brain. So this becomes an interesting dilemma. Now, I'll get to how I did it shortly. You had your hand up all in the back. All right, so the reason why I knew what to say with his father in the first place and the applicability to you in each and every interaction you have. So let's go down another rabbit hole first. First time I was in the Philippines on a kidnapping that I'm going to talk about in a little while. I get invited into the Philippines because the U.S. ambassador, the direct representative of the President of the United States, which is what every ambassador is, there is nobody between them and the President. The Secretary of State would argue about that, but the ambassador is the direct representative of the President of the United States. The ambassador in the Philippines has asked for me by name. The ambassador of the Philippines asked for me by name because the head of the FBI in the Philippines, who is the direct representative of the director of the FBI, has gone to the ambassador and said, we need Chris Voss. And they had to put my name on State Department communications to grant me something called country clearance for the explicit purpose of advising the American and the Philippine government on the kidnapping of this American. They walk me into a room, and everybody except the President of the Philippines is in the room. The Secretary of Defense is in the room, cabinet officials are in the room, the head of the Philippine National Police, which is, since it's the National Police, he is a cabinet level position. The only reason the President of the Philippines is not there is because his personal representative is, his personal advisor. They walk me into the who's who room of the Philippine government, even knowing I'm there, called for by name by the ambassador, and in sum and substance say to me, how are you going to help us? They immediately challenge my credentials. And I make the mistake of trotting out my resume. Well, I've been an FBI agent. At that time, I'd probably been an FBI agent for about 17, 18 years. Member of the Joint Terrorist Task Force in New York City. Not only a member of the Joint Terrorist Task Force in New York City, because this was a terrorism incident with an al-Qaeda-related group. I've won the Attorney General's Award for Excellence in Law Enforcement for combating terrorism. Not only that, I won the FBI Agents Association Award for Distinguished and Exemplary Service. Not only that, I'm the FBI's lead kidnapping negotiator. Not only that, have I trained with Quantico and Scotland Yard. I wrote the book that we trained from. I'm the author of the kidnapping book that we trained from at Quantico. And after laying out my extensive resume, I can tell you that they were suitably unimpressed. They might as well have yawned in my face. I remember coming out of that room, the head of our office, they questioned your credentials. They never bought in that you knew where, that was very disrespectful. And I remember coming out of there. I'm from a small town in Iowa. I said, how often does a guy from Iowa get to argue with the Secretary of Defense of an entire country? That was cool. Let's go back and go in again. But the reason for that is your resume and the people that you interact with, their resume correlates loosely with whether or not they know what they're doing. If your resume correlated completely with whether or not you knew what you were doing or anybody knew, no one would ever make a bad hire. And no one would ever not do a good job because you would look at their resume and know whether or not they could do it. So the resume correlates loosely with whether or not somebody knows what they're doing. And we all know the phrase, there's 10 years of experience and there's 1 year of experience 10 times. So having made the mistake once in the Philippines, I knew what to say to this father. And this is what I said to the father. All right, Haitian kidnappers are not killing kidnapped victims these days. I know that's really stupid because they kill each other at the drop of a hat. But for whatever reason, a fact of the matter is they're not killing kidnap victims. Now, today is Thursday, and Haitian kidnappers love to party on Saturday night. If you say the things I want you to say, when I want you to say them, we will have your son out late Friday, early Saturday morning. He immediately says, tell me what you want me to do. And we had his son out Saturday morning. So there's 3 phases that we'll go through in negotiations. But in every phase is going to be a version of what we call tactical empathy. And I'm here to tell you that tactical empathy is your opening move. Tactical empathy is your counter move. Tactical empathy is your closing move. So let's talk about what I said, or more importantly, let's see if we can figure out what I didn't say to that father. And I will also tell you that through the duration of that kidnapping, he never once asked me how many kidnappings I'd worked. He never asked me how long I'd been an FBI agent. He never asked me how many times I've been to Haiti. You guys know how many times I've been to Haiti?
0.
I've never been to Haiti. He didn't ask me if I spoke the local language. I barely speak English. None of those questions. What didn't I say to him? I didn't say, trust me. Did I ask him one single question where I tried to get him to say yes? Not one. Not one. Did I tell him how I was going to get his son out? Because here's an inescapable law of gravity, law of negotiation gravity. And you ignore laws of gravity at your peril. By the way, does anybody know how gravity works? And point of fact, nobody knows how it works. We do know that Isaac Newton's ideas about gravity were wrong. You know, I sort of imagined gravity was like a magnetic thing, and somehow the earth pulled us down, and it pulled everything down different ways, and it's like this magnetic thing. Now they're satisfied that's not the case, and they think gravity is a force that actually pushes down on us from above, and they are speculating that gravity and space are the exact same things, and that space has a fabric, which is why what causes a rotation of planets is they move through it, because there's a friction with gravity. But the bottom line is nobody knows how gravity works. So I'm going to share with you today and this afternoon certain things that we refer to as laws of gravity. And I'll give you an example of how important these laws might be. Kathleen, I'm going to ask you to help me out here, all right? So just stay right there. I got the front door key to my house here, all right? So I want you to say, I don't believe in gravity.
I don't believe in gravity.
Louder.
I don't believe in gravity.
Louder.
I don't believe in gravity.
Now everybody help her out. I don't believe in gravity.
I don't believe in gravity.
Louder.
I don't believe in gravity.
Gravity don't give a fuck what you believe. So here's a law of gravity that's going to be hard for you to wrap your mind around. Once you tell somebody how to do something, and learning how to do it is part of what your value is, as soon as you share value, it's unavoidable that you are now less valuable. There's no way around that. No matter how well-intentioned and good-hearted the person is on the other side, and how much you're trying to engage them in reciprocity and quid pro quo and exchange and this for that, the minute you begin to give them, let me give you a taste of what I could do. Let me give you an example. You want to know how I'm going to do something? Let me give you just a sample of it. The minute you do that, you are now at a diminished value from that point forward. There's no way around that. And it will always cause you problems. I did not tell that father how we were going to get his son out. When you begin to explain to people how you're going to do something, one of two things happens. They either go like, oh, I could do that myself. What do I need you for? Or they say, if you're really good and you know some really counterintuitive insights, it's going to be so counterintuitive, they're going to say, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. I'm not hiring you. For example, one of the ways we get kidnapped victims out is we schedule calls with the kidnappers. And they call on time. In your world, how hard is it to get somebody to call on time? Let alone a kidnapper, a criminal, a sociopath, a killer. If I'd have said, as the father would have said, how are you going to get my son out? My first answer would have been, well, we're going to schedule calls with the kidnappers. He'd have been like, I call somebody else. He never would have believed that. I know how to get a kid. I want a kidnapper to call at 10. I know how to get him to call at 10. I'm going to call all the time because I know the emotional intelligence buttons to push and how to do a change in the sequencing of the events. And they're going to call at 10. And if the one time they don't call at 10, we got a ready-made excuse so that they're going, oh, I'm sorry, I'll call back at 10. But nobody would believe that. So we don't share. I didn't try to get them to say yes. I didn't share any value. So what makes somebody say, tell me what you want me to do? What's the distinguishing characteristic? This is tactical empathy. Because after they say to themselves, how are you going to help me? Their very next question is, do I have to explain this to you? Do you have any idea what I'm looking at? The slightest idea of what I'm faced with. And what I did was I laid out for him what he was faced with in clear terms. Here's the dynamic of your environment. Here's what you are faced with. In any of your interactions, any of your business interactions, the next thing they ask themselves about you is, how much of this do I have to lay on for you? Do I have time to educate you on what my challenges are? You start out with, here's what you're looking at. One of two things happen. If you've done empathy right, the other side says, that's right. We'll get into the that's right response. They say to you, that's right. You got it. And the interesting thing about whenever anybody says that's right, whether it's a little that's right or a big that's right, you've given them a piece of an epiphany, whether it be a subtle, small epiphany or a really big epiphany, that creates an actual chemical change in somebody's body. That chemical change also causes them to feel bonded to you. When someone says that's right to you, either a little bit or a lot, they've felt empathy from you. We use empathy to get empathy from them. Sociopaths use empathy because they know when they use it on people, the person feels bonded to them. Empathy is not sympathy. Empathy is not compassion. A necessary step to compassion is empathy. But they're not the same thing. Empathy is a preferred tool of influence among sociopaths. Daniel Goleman wrote a book called Focus. In it, chapter either 9 or 10 is the empathy triad. He refers to this type of empathy as cognitive empathy, and he clearly states it's the influence and persuasion tool of choice of sociopaths because it works quickly and it's durable. It's low maintenance influence and it lasts, which is tailor-made for a sociopath because they are lazy. So empathy is a ridiculously powerful thing to use with the other side. And you begin to lay out to somebody what their challenges are, and even the slightest bit of insight I said to the market, which was true, but he didn't realize it, kidnappers want to party on Saturday night. He's like, of course. Our shot is a narrow window, late Friday, early Saturday morning. What's the human nature aspect of this that's dominating? And this is true in everybody's business. Anybody trying to get anything done on Wall Street in August? You worked on Wall Street. What happens in August? Yeah. Why?
Because everybody's on vacation.
Exactly. They're on the Hamptons. What about after December 8th? They're partying again, and they're cutting up their bonuses. Kidnappers want to party on Saturday night. Wall Streeters want to party in the Hamptons in August. Right? And I actually like that analogy an awful lot too, right? Kidnappers and Wall Streeters. But there are social dynamics that exist for everybody because we're all human beings. And the tactical empathy approach, by the way, as a side note, is this stuff cross-cultural? Every hostage negotiation team in the world uses the same skills. Guys in Tel Aviv, the guys in Cape Town, guys in Tokyo, guys here in Los Angeles. We all use the exact same skills because humans are wired with something called the limbic system, and we all have the exact same wiring regardless of what our gender or our ethnicity is. The limbic system is very much like the respiratory system. Kathleen's respiratory system is exactly the same as mine, as Tom's. Your limbic system, mine, yours, wired and works exactly the same way. Which is one of the analogies, I like the analogy to the respiratory system because I would ask you, can you control your breathing?
Probably.
Okay, stop breathing till tomorrow. We got the same level of control over our emotions. You can step in forcefully and stop your emotions for about 60 seconds maximum. And then autopilot's gonna kick back into gear and it's gonna go back into the operation. And there's some subtleties to the operation that we discovered in hostage negotiation that we thought just had to do with terrorists and criminals and kidnappers. But when we discovered neuroscience, and then Danny Kahneman came along and won the Nobel Peace Prize in behavioral economics, basically saying everything is fear-driven. And then the neuroscience backed it up. Hostage negotiation works not because they were kidnappers, but because they were people. And there are human nature reactions that govern all activity. And they work under all circumstances to varying degrees, but they work the same way. The neuroscience rules work the same way all the time. And you ignore the neuroscience rules, you're ignoring laws of gravity. And one of those rules, which we found out, is that the amygdala, which is the nerve center of the limbic system, which every thought in the brain goes through the limbic system, that the nerve center is a little organ that is 75% dedicated to negative thoughts. 75% of the wiring in the amygdala is dedicated to negativity. And when we teach people negotiations, that's how we accelerate success. And we accelerate outcomes. Because if your brain is operating 75% negative, if I get a choice to say one thing, which can either enhance your positive thoughts or deactivate your negative thoughts, but the one sentence that deactivates negative thoughts is 3 times as powerful as the one sentence that activates positives, I'm lazy. I'm going after the negative first. Now, in hostage negotiation, we were always presented with negative emotions, and we were just taught to emotion label. The presenting emotions were always negative, and we got through stuff really, really fast. And we didn't know that that was just a human nature dynamic, that the biggest dominating force were the negative thoughts, because that was just what was presented to us. We were also taught, interestingly enough, in every case to look for the loss. The loss triggered the behavior. And then Daniel Kahneman comes along in 2002 and wins the Nobel Prize in behavioral economics for saying, as human beings, loss thinks twice as much as an equivalent gain. Not hostage takers, humans. Not Americans, humans. A universal rule of human behavior were driven by fear of loss at a 2-to-1 ratio. And then Kahneman gives an interview, he says, and his partner was Amos Tversky. They're 2 Israeli psychologists, and they viewed themselves basically as radicals and disruptors. And their interest was not what's the theory, what works. And they discovered what worked. And then the only reason Amos Tversky didn't get the Nobel Prize also was he died before they handed it out. They don't hand it out posthumously, forgive my pronunciation. But Kahneman gives an interview and says, yeah, Amos and I, actually it's not twice as much. It's more like 5 to 7 times as much. We just lowered the number to 2 because we wanted fewer arguments from our colleagues. All right. Here's what I avoided, though, and here's the hard part. Here's how hard it is, because most of us, I get bad news for you. It's going to sound harsh. It's going to sound insulting. It's going to sound very insulting. Most people are crackheads for yes. Most of us have a yes addiction. We love, love, love to hear it. And yes has been called one of the most beautiful words in the English language. I mean, think of how good it feels to hear yeah. And before Never Split the Difference, and still, there's only 2 books that stay competitive in the sales market with Never Split the Difference, and one of the others is Getting to Yes. Exactly. And also, there's an interesting dynamic that we discovered recently in some discussions with another speaker, Sean Stevenson. Many of you are familiar with Sean, brilliant speaker. When we say yes as a group, collectively, we feel good, but only if we're in a group, because we're saying it in the safety of a group. But I'll ask you this, on this whole yes thing, how do you feel when the voice on the other end of the phone says, have you got a few minutes to talk? What's your gut reaction? Right. Why? I thought you love yes. You love yes. You love yes. It's an opportunity to say yes. Why does your gut say no? Why is your gut telling you that this is going on? Why is that? Experience. Excellent. Now we're getting to it. What's your experience? You're being hooked into something you don't want. Google, when you get the chance, momentum selling, or the yes momentum. It is alive and well, and thank God that it is, because everybody that listens to it is falling behind the people that we coach. And there are people that are addicted to getting a yes, and it goes exactly like this. Each yes is called a micro agreement. It's referred to as a tie down. Get a series of micro agreements, a series of tie downs, then they have to say yes to the big thing at the end. So our goal is yes. Our goal is a big commitment yes. Is today Saturday? Are we in Los Angeles? Would you like to make more money? Buy more copies of my book. We know that's coming. And the other thing, too, that's interesting about this is actually called mirror agreement. And there's an academic study out there that says mirror agreement works. And if it works, then I can sell whatever I want to each and every one of you just by getting you to say yes to something 3 times. And I could sell you anything I want. Is that true? No, it's not. Now, maybe it was true at one point in time. Like, I don't know if you're like me, when you were about 19, 20 years old, you bought a stupid coupon book that was supposed to be worth $25,000 and only cost you $25, and you could buy cars and houses and clothes and food for a year. And because I asked you a whole bunch of yes questions, and it's exactly what you said. We have an experience of getting burned by this. And I haven't met anybody yet that's not sensitive to it. So much so, it becomes what happens when you try to hug a battered child? They flinch. And some people say, well, I'm not trying to manipulate somebody. I'm not a swampland salesman. I'm not a used car salesman. I'm being genuine and respectful. I'm only trying to be respectful. I'm only trying to make sure I'm on solid ground. I don't care. That kid got beat already. We're all yes battered. We've all been led down this trap enough times that the minute that somebody starts it on us, our guard comes up to some degree, even when it's somebody that we trust. And it took us, when I first tumbled to this, I came to it quicker than my son. I remember my son and I, he's the director of operations in my company, and he's a better negotiator than I am. He cuts all our deals. But early on, we're coming out of a building in Jersey. We'd done a training in the building, and a security guard, the same guy that let us in, because it's a secure building, he's got to take our IDs. He's sitting there, same guy that let us in, he's on duty in uniform. It says Allied Security. And my son is saying, I don't know that people are always defensive when you try to get them to say yes. So I look at the security guard. He's on duty in uniform, and the uniform says Allied Security. And I say, do you work for Allied Security? He goes, What makes you ask? And I look at my son and I went, what's the peril to answering yes to that? There is none. We're all yes battered. It diminishes, even with people we trust, even with people that we know, it diminishes rapport every time to some degree, to varying degrees, but it diminishes rapport every time. And if there are people that are not getting back to you on the phone, it's for a combination of two reasons. One of them is they're tired of the yes questions. They don't know that's what it is. I had one of the students at USC here about 2-3 years ago, wealth management guy, got a great relationship with one of his high net worth customers, he thought, till his secretary gets a call from her secretary that she's switching all the accounts. And fortunately, he's had a long enough history with her. He manages to get her on the phone. And this is, I had people document these interactions and give them back to me word for word. So I saw word for word what he said with this woman. And word for word, when he finally got her on the phone, she said, I just didn't want you to talk me into something again. But he was respectfully asking her yes questions. And she felt that she was being talked into something over and over and over again. And it had nothing to do with his performance. There was just something about the approach that made her a little more uncomfortable, so much so that she wouldn't even tell him herself. She had her person call his person. And even in the course of the conversation, because I got the transcript word for word, a couple of times he inadvertently would ask her yes questions, and her immediate dialogue was instantly defensive every time he did it. And we talked about it after the fact, because he had almost gotten out of the yes habit, but not completely, and he was still asking her yes questions. And I said, look at this dialogue. Every time you ask her a yes question, she backs up on you again. He got her back in, and he got out of the habit of answering the yes question. But the problem is, we've all been exploited so many times. We've been yes battered. And if you can just get out of that all by itself, just out of that, and shift, the 2mm shift is going to be into a couple things. And this is the first one. Who's that? Jack Welch, former CEO of GE, author of Winning and Jack. I think his wife co-authored all of his books with him. I don't know that she got full credit until he and her Susie Welch did the real life MBA. Now come through here about 3 years ago. Can't remember if it was just before or just after my book came out. But I'm at a book signing. Jack and Susie Welch are at a book signing. I'm going to ask Jack Welch to come speak at the class that I'm talking to at USC. You're me. You're at a book signing. You're going to walk up to Jack Welch. What do you say? Interesting. You're probably not interested in coming to teach in my class, are you? Close. What's your gut instinct, though? What's the approach?
Yes, Jack. Yes, Jack.
Yes, Jack. Yes, Jack. Jump up and down. Jump up and down. Right? What do you say? How different is this from the time frame and the Haiti kidnap and your first impression every time you talk to somebody anyway? How much time have you got with Jack Welch? Max. Might even be less. Because what happens at a book signing with 200 people at the book signing? Before you get to Jack, somebody stops you and says, what's your name? We don't want Jack to make a mistake with your name. Let's write your name down so Jack doesn't make a mistake. True, but what's that really for? So you don't speak to Jack, right? I was at a book signing. I was lucky enough to be at a book signing at this monstrous conference just a couple weeks ago. The team that's putting me through the signing looks at me and he says, we want no one to be with you from the moment they walk up, they get the book signed, they pose for pictures. Nobody's going to be with you for longer than 30 seconds or we're not going to get through everybody that's in line. I'm like, good God. Because there are 200 people standing in line. You try to strike up a conversation with the speaker. I mean, people are coming up to you and want to talk to you. Very well intentioned, right? But we got 200 people in line. Anybody spends more than 30 seconds, we go from an hour to 6 hours, like that. So they're hustling you through the line to try to get everybody through the line. Problem one. What's problem two? Jack Welch is a legitimate celebrity, right? He's got a security detail. I'm going to get this close to Jack Welch. Action's quicker than reaction. They don't know who I am. I haven't been through a metal detector. They don't know I didn't lose my family fortune shorting GE stock at the wrong time. They don't know that I don't have a gun. As a matter of fact, under this circumstance, I do have a gun, but Jack Welch is not in any danger from me because they don't know I'm an FBI agent either because I haven't provided any identification. Jane Fonda was at a book signing probably about 10, 15 years ago, and a former Vietnam vet got close enough to her, he spit right in her face. Because they can't, action's quicker than reaction. You're going to get this close, the security detail can make you pay for what you've done, but they can't stop you. I'm going to get this close to Jack Welch. I could kiss him on the lips if I wanted to, right? Even more horrifying than any of the other outcomes. What do you say? You're me, what do you say? This is the audience participation part of the program. Hi, Jack. Cool, all right. Now, and now, clock's ticking.
Let's make a deal.
Let's make a deal. Another statement. Good question. Because he doesn't know me. It's Dave, right? Are you a ringer? Did you know the answer already? Or are you just paying attention?
Paying attention.
I walk up to Jack Welch, and I remember I had one of the top PR guys from Los Angeles with me who got me into it. And to this day, he missed what I did. And I said, how did Jack Welch react? He said, yeah, I never saw that before. I walk up to Jack Welch and I say, is it a ridiculous idea for you to come and speak at the negotiation course I teach at USC? And he looked at me, and he looked up and to the left, and he got this really intense scowl on his face. And he just froze, and he didn't move. And I thought, I just killed Jack Welch. Because he's not a young dude, right? And he looked like he had a stroke. I mean, he looked so furious. I thought he died. He was going to fall over, and security was going to blame me for killing him, and they'd drag me out in handcuffs. So when he doesn't die, initially I'm relieved, but now he still looks furious. Now I think he's going to start going, security, security. He finally unfreezes and he looks at me and says, this is my personal assistant's name. This is a special Twitter account we have set up to communicate with her. I will call her and tell her who you are and what you want. I think we're going to be in Los Angeles in the fall. If we are, we'll come in and speak at your class. Think how far I got by triggering a calibrated no. It's not only worth at least 5 yeses, it's probably worth about 5 more hows. Because I get yes and how, and yes and how, and yes and how, based on one no. Now this is the only one we don't have the neuroscience on. We got the neuroscience on the rest of the stuff, and it just hasn't been discovered yet. I can't tell you for sure what makes this work. I can speculate on a couple of reasons based on some other dynamics that I know to be true about the way the brain works. And again, when I talk about this stuff, we don't even talk psychology anymore because neuroscience is hard science. Psychology was great speculation when we couldn't actually see into the brain, and we can see into the brain right now, and we can see what happens, and we can see what parts of the brain light up. You'd be shocked at what people will say no to. Shocked, stunned. I've had employees say to bosses, do you want me to fail? And not had a negative response, because there's something about saying no that makes people feel safe and protected. Those of you that have teenagers, what do you say to your teenagers all the time? When my son was 17, Dad, can I? No. But in looking back on it, having said no, I would then go on to say, now, what was it that you wanted? Because I felt like I could hear him out. because I felt like I protected myself. I felt like proceeding did not signal a commitment of any kind. So by continuing the conversation with no commitment of any kind, I was free now to engage in an actual conversation. You know, the phrase that kids are good at negotiating with parents because they don't take no for an answer is wrong. And it's not kids and parents, it's humans to humans, and children have learned how persuadable people are having said no. And how much more people are willing to listen, having said no. And so we're starting to road test this early on in my company, because Jim Camp's book, Start With No, was simply about letting the other side feel free to say no. There's a misnomer about the book and its application. I worked with Jim, I was friends with Jim. Jim has since died. I thought Jim was brilliant. We've still done stuff with his son, who still runs his company. But it was only, Jim's whole approach would be, he called it the right to veto, and he'd start a conversation and say, you can say no to me at any time. You are free to say no. Anytime you say no, Jim said, anytime I give you the right to veto. And he found that people were more persuadable having been offered the opportunity to say no. So we start taking it to the next step. Well, what happens when you actually get them to say no? Then a couple years later, we're teaching this concept at Georgetown, and there's a guy that's doing fundraising at night. It's the second Obama run for office. Obama's up for re-election. This guy's doing dialing for dollars at night with a Republican fundraising committee. What's their script? Like every other sales script. Call them and ask 3 questions. Each one is designed to get a yes. Get your 3 yeses, ask for the money. I remember the first one was, would you like to see the Republicans back in the White House in November? So he goes in and he takes the yes script and he changes every yes question to a no. And he starts out with, have you given up on taking the White House back in November? And he ran the yes script and the no script side by side that night, and the no script got a 23% higher success rate. And I would offer to you that just switching from yes to no may bump your success rate immediately by 23%. Now, there are some people that say, look, I get people to say yes and I make deals. And I'm not arguing with that at all. I'm here to tell you you're not making as many as you could be making. This is about raising your batting average. And we have a little bit of a data selection process also. Like, I can tell you that in my single days, I could get a woman's telephone number every time. Every time. I had a system that never failed me. Now, it had to be Tuesday. Had to be Tuesday evening about 7:30. Had to be in my favorite steakhouse restaurant in Washington, D.C. There had to be room at the bar. She has to be sitting alone. There has to be seats on either side of her. I sit down innocently, and I have to engage in a conversation with the bartender, and the bartenders in the Capitol Grill in D.C. know me, so we engage in friendly conversation long enough so that she sees that I'm not a random serial killer from off the street. At least the bartenders know me. At that point in time, then I have to wait for her to comment about how friendly I am with the bartenders. But I can get a woman's phone number every time, it never fails me. Well, some salespeople are like that. I get the deal every time. But you forget about all the conditions that have to line up. Do I get a woman's phone number every time? There are a lot of conditions there, right? But I'm saying I can get a woman's phone number every time. That's how I get women's phone number. And we have a tendency to do a little bit of data selection on our successes. So I'm not saying that you can't make a deal by getting people to say yes. I'm saying you're not making as many as you could be making. And that's only one of the things that we teach, switching from yes to no. Now, that sounded simple, right? Here's how hard it's going to be. And we're going to have some actual audience participation here. So I'm going to ask everybody to stand up. I want you to get both hands free. I want you to get a nice, solid stance, feet shoulder width apart, your arms at about 90 degrees, fists with both hands, right thumb up, left forefinger out. See, that took a while for some. Let me look around. See, everybody's, Bob, you got 2 thumbs up, bro. Now switch. Switch back. Ow, it hurts my head. Switch again. Quicker, speed it up, faster. Come on, let's go. Go, 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 go. All right, thank you very much for playing, everybody. Now, did what I asked you to do, was that complicated? Is it complicated to switch from yes to no? Did what I asked you to do was complicated? No, but was it difficult? As adults, this is an interesting thing. We found out both of these components. We used to say, as adults, our barrier to learning is discomfort. That discomfort in learning a new skill. Because basically, since about 23 or 23 years old, we started getting stuff right, and we started getting into this comfort zone where we got stuff right. And now we react negatively to discomfort. The other thing is, an interesting book out there, if you're interested in really studying about how to get better at stuff, Daniel Coyle wrote a book called The Talent Code. Phenomenal book on getting better. And that awkwardness, that discomfort is also the key to accelerated learning. The Talent Code, Daniel Coyle. If you're not learning something and feeling awkward, you're learning at an average pace. If you feel awkward while you're learning it, you are in accelerated learning mode. And that feeling of awkwardness is actually the creation of a new neurosynaptic connection in your head. The brain science behind it. A new neurosynaptic connection. And every single time you fire that connection, there's a substance in your brain called myelin, and another layer of myelin gets wrapped around the connection. And those of you that are familiar with electricity, the more you insulate an electrical connection, the more effective it fires. And every single time you fire that synaptic connection, it fires a little more efficiently each and every time. And the synapses that fire together wire together. How long does it take to learn a new habit? Ballpark, I'm hearing a lot of numbers, in and around plus or minus 21 days, right? Roughly. I listened to John Foley of Blue Angel Pilot give a talk a couple years ago. He talked about wiring a new groove in your brain. Blue Angel pilots have to build their habits before they get up in the sky, or lots of people die because they're flying jets at supersonic speeds 6 inches apart. 6 or 7 jets over crowds of people. He said 63 repetitions, 63 to 64 repetitions to wire a new groove in your brain, which corresponds to about 3 weeks, because if you try it anywhere from 3 to 6 times a day, then it's going to take you about 3 weeks to get your reps in. So getting out of yes into no is going to stop you in your tracks. Awkward. Until you get your 63 reps in. I can do it quickly now because I got my reps in. That's the only reason I got my reps in. The other thing that Coyle points out about accelerated learning also, and a number of you are doing it right now, you learn faster via handwriting. And it's a different mental process than typing. Your brain engages in a completely different way, and writing out a negotiation skill that you want to use in advance is the equivalent of saying it. And you can get your reps in by handwriting. Some of you have probably already discovered some interesting stuff along these lines also if you've worked on your talks by handwriting them. When I was getting ready for the TED Talk that I gave last February, and they wanted me to memorize it, and I'm not a memorized guy, I'm an ad-lib guy, and I put up a picture and I talked for 45 minutes. They said, no, you gotta script it, you gotta memorize it, you gotta hit the exact time frame. And I'm trying to memorize it, and I got it scripted out, but in trying to memorize it, I'm typing it. And I finally thought, wait a minute, maybe I ought to take my own advice, and I started handwriting it. Not only did I memorize it faster, but I had additional ideas occur to me while I was handwriting that never occurred to me when I was typing. So when you're working on your keynotes or you're working on your talks, just Experiment with handwriting it out and see if your brain doesn't get engaged in a much more interesting and creative way. Because you're building the neurosynaptic connections by doing that. So ideally you start working on your no's. And what if no is not enough? By the way, each and every one of your yes questions can be switched from do you agree to do you disagree? Would you like to do this? Are you against doing it? Does this look like something that would work for you? Is this a ridiculous idea? Any one of your normal yes questions. You take them down and just write them out and just switch the front end so that you get the exact same response with a no, and experiment with it. See what happens. I tell you in advance, you're going to be delighted. Let's go back to the have you given up on taking the White House back in November? You have anybody that's not getting back to you. I don't care how long it's been. They're not answering your phone calls, they're not answering your emails. Send them a one-line text only or a one-line email only with only this in the subject. Have you given up on, and then name whatever it is that they're working on with you. Have you given up on working with a Black Swan group? Have you given up on the project that you're developing with the Black Swan group? 900 times out of 1,000, they will answer in less than 10 minutes. More like 3 to 5. I'm trying to close Robert Herjavec here in town about a year and a half ago. We're doing one of our negotiation training sessions in New York. We do them across the country. They're expensive. I'm here to tell you, if you buy a ticket to one of our one-day trainings, it's expensive. I get introduced to Herjavec, who, by the way, is a wonderfully generous guy. He is a better guy than he appears on Shark Tank, and he comes off as a good guy on Shark Tank. I get introduced via an email. His office happens to be about a 15-minute walk from where I live. He invites me to lunch at BOA Steakhouse, and best of all, he pays. And we're there for 90 minutes. How often you get 90 minutes first introduction with somebody like that, right? So I said, how about, Robert, we're putting on a training course in New York. I'd like to give you a complimentary ticket. Now, I don't think he's coming. I want him to send his head of sales or somebody like that. And again, his response shows you what a generous dude he is. He instantly says, how many can we buy? Wow, awesome. Because most people, you offer them something free, they're like, awesome. How many more can I get for free? Not how many can I pay for? So we're going back and forth with Herjavec and his people on how many tickets they're going to buy, and our number ranges from 3 to 9, and they can't give us a straight answer. My son calls me on the phone because we're selling out, and he says, if Herjavec doesn't pull the trigger on the tickets tonight, he doesn't get any. He doesn't even get his free ticket. Because it ain't my son that's promising a free ticket, it's me. And my son is mad because the tickets are expensive, and every one that I give away free, Mr. Soft Touch here, costs the rest of the team money. So he says, you get Herjavec to commit tonight. It's 5 o'clock on Monday. The other problem is all my team is on the East Coast. What's the problem? 3-hour time difference. It's 8 in New York. And worse than that, New York has been at work for 3 or 4 hours before we get out of bed in LA. And the window's going to be slammed shut before the sun rises the next day. At 5:03, I send Herjavec an email that says, are you against committing to 3 tickets now? Second line, are you against paying for them before the business day starts in New York tomorrow? 5:04, 1 minute later, is his answer. No, we will commit to 3 tickets now. No, my assistant will be in touch with you within an hour. Send me a link and we will pay. I have sent the link and they are paid by 5:23. After 5 o'clock. How often do you get people to pull a trigger on anything that quick, let alone at 5 o'clock in the afternoon? The other thing that we found to be true about no is, no matter how fatigued somebody is, they could say no matter how tired they are. You all suffer from the same problem that I suffer from, which is decision fatigue. You can only make so many decisions in a given day. It's a real reason why Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg only ever wore black t-shirts, because they know that their decisions each and every day. Mark Zuckerberg makes the decision is probably worth $50 million. He's not blowing $50 million on what color shirt to wear, because he knows he's got decision fatigue. I used to have an intern that I finally said, never ask me a what or a how question after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because he was scared to do anything wrong, and he would at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he'd be like, how do you want me to handle this? And I'm burned out by 2 o'clock in the afternoon because I've been working all day, and my answer is, I don't know. Don't bother me anymore. And finally I said to him, never ask me a question after 1 o'clock in the afternoon where the answer isn't start with no. And I found that every time he'd say, all right, I'm planning to do it like this. And if it was wrong, I'd say, no, don't do it like this. Do this, 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 and this. And no matter how tired I was, I could instantly give him all the guidance, having said no. So the utility of this is crazy. It's just, and the only way you're going to buy into it is to try it. That's the only way you're going to be able to execute it. And the only way you're going to get to the point where you can do it automatically is just get your reps in. It isn't any more complicated than that. Now, what if no is not enough? You got to get a that's right out of the other side. Now this is our counteroffer. This is another aspect of tactical empathy. Tactical empathy is when you summarize a situation for the other side that they so fully and so completely, but especially the stuff that you would otherwise deny. If your gut instinct is telling you, you want to say to them, I don't want you to think. I don't want you to feel. Instead of denying it, just call it out as part of your summary. People call us on the phone and we say, look, it's got to be really tough calling a negotiation firm up and trying to negotiate with them. Gut instinct might be, I don't want you to be nervous about talking to us. That's the denial, the 2 millimeter shift from the denial to the observation. Got to be tough talking to us. Summarize it from the other side's point of view, especially the stuff that you would otherwise deny, that you would want them to think about. This is the equivalent of calling out the elephant in the room. When there's an elephant in a room, you say, pay no attention to the elephant, it's not there. You say, I don't want you to look at the elephant. The people are like, no, it's there, I'm looking at it. But what if there's an elephant in the room and you go like, there's an elephant in the room? People look at it and go like, yeah, well, so. It immediately diminishes it. And there's brain science behind this. The upward spiral. I can't remember the author's name. They did an experiment. They put people in the fMRI so they could watch the electrical activity in the brain. Watch it. We know where the amygdala is. We know exactly where it is. We know what parts of the amygdala house negative emotions. In great specificity, we know exactly where this stuff is. So they put people in the fMRI, they show them a picture that induces a negative emotion. Could make them sad, could make them scared, lonely, whatever it is. Just a visual image that induces a negative. They watch the part of the amygdala light up. And all they do is they say to the person, identify what you're feeling. Just call it out. And every time, not some of the time, every time, the electrical activity in the negative part of the amygdala diminished. Every time. Hard correlation. Strong correlation. Now, the important point about that is the degree of impact was not consistent, but the type of impact was. So the calling out of the negative, just as an observation, may have a little bit of a diffusing effect, or it may have a complete defusing effect. But it has the same type of effect every time. Degree of impact changes, which is why in some cases you may need to call out a negative more than once to get it to go away. And people that we train in this, sometimes they say, well, we have an entire approach that we refer to as an accusations audit, where you call out each and every accusation the other side might be harboring against you. They say, I did the accusations audit and it didn't work because they just stared at me. And I said, no, it's not that it didn't work, you didn't go far enough. Somebody, on the approach of calling out the negative, if they just look at you, what they're telling you is you're on the right track, you didn't go far enough. And so degree of impact and type of impact are two different ideas. So we're calling out as part of our summary of the situation, as part of our demonstration of understanding of the environment. We're calling out the negatives and we're driving for that's right. Now you guys do this all the time also. And the 2 millimeter shift is from that's right to you're right. Because you guys love hearing you're right as much as you love hearing yes. You love it. And you know what happens when someone says you're right to you? You know what happens? You shut up. Because it's so satisfying. And you also use that phrase to get people to shut up. Every one of you did it a couple times this week. Family member, spouse, colleague, they're hammering you with something. You either have to or you want to maintain a relationship with them, but you just want them to shut up. And you look at them and you go, you're right. And they shut up. And half the time they shut up and they go away. And you go back to whatever behavior was annoying them in the first place. And then they wait a day and they come back and they start in on you again. And you look at them again and go, you're right. And they shut up and they leave again. It's insane. Everybody does this and everybody falls for it. Because on the other end of it, we think we're right. Somebody says, you're right to us. We go, woohoo, we're really happy. But that's right is a different shift. Because when somebody's saying you're right to you, at some point, they're putting distance between you and them. They're choosing, they may not be able to argue with you, but they're choosing to keep distance between themselves and what you just said. They either consciously or subconsciously chose the word you in that context to say you're right. Whatever side of the political aisle you're on, in the last presidential election, when you watched Donald debate Hillary, whoever you were in favor of, when they said something that you bought into completely, you didn't look at the TV and go, you're right. You looked at the TV and you said, that's right. It's unconditional acceptance as being true. And if it's unconditional acceptance as being true, then you feel bonded to it. And every single that's right begins to show that the other side is slowly bonding with you, and they don't know it. How are we doing on time? Last point, because we talked about sociopaths before. This is the tactical application of empathy. And the reason why we talk about tactical empathy is because we got neuroscience now. We're not speculating about how the brain works. There's no avoiding the fact that calling out negatives diffuses them. None. There's no avoiding the fact that we're driven by fears of loss, which is a negative emotion. That's our primary decision-making function. There's no way around that. If we know that, ignore it the same way you ignore gravity. You will fall off the top of the building. We can't explain gravity, but I don't think anybody here is willing to step off the top of the building today because they can't explain how it works. So does the application of empathy work with sociopaths? Well, this is an American doing stupid stuff overseas, like what I talked about before, and this is a sociopath that got him. Now, this guy is a straight out of the movies, murdering, head chopping, raping, killing machine. This guy is a sociopath. He always was photographed, because if you're a terrorist, it's about publicity. Every single picture of him in the Philippines at the time is an Al-Qaeda-related terrorist group in the south of the Philippines. He always had on the sunglasses. He always had on a black bandana. He always had on a black T-shirt. He always had on camel pants. And he always had a .45 strapped to his side because he thought he was photogenic. The media has literally got him on speed dial. And he's got them on speed dial. Literally. They would call him during terrorist incidents. They would call him on the phone and ask him questions in Tagalog, his local language, and he would answer in English because he wanted his voice on CNN. And he literally told reporters there should be a movie made about him. And he was also proud of the fact that he could relieve you of your head with 2 swipes of a machete. They had developed a very specific way of literally cutting people's heads off, and occasionally they would have contests among members of their terrorist group with hostages on their knees to see who could cut somebody's head off better than the others. These guys, and he is their leader, are killing, raping, sociopathic machines, and they've got this American, and this is the guy that I'm coaching. He was in the back of the room, that room that I walked into where the Secretary of Defense and everybody else was in, that I almost got thrown out of early on. He was in the back of the room, and he is the commander of the Philippine Special Action Force at the time. And this picture is taken with him sitting at his desk, and what's cut out of the picture is he actually had a nameplate on the front of his desk that said his name, Benji Magalog, and public servant. And he was one of the few honest guys in the Philippines. To this day, I would still trust him with the life of my son. Honest, decent guy. Commander of the Philippine Special Action Force, was the Philippine National Police version of the Navy SEALs. When I first met Benji, it was August, and his team, which he led into battle every time, had been on 30 kidnapping rescue missions. It was August. And he and his guys didn't take handcuffs. 30 firefights. He's the first one through the door. This guy was a warrior, but coachable. And listened to the coaching that I gave him. And while he wasn't terribly comfortable with what seemed nice, he was open enough to realize that we were slowly gaining control of the conversation. Now, the ransom demand for the American, as it turns out, is $10 million, but it's not $10 million in ransom. Our sociopath is smart enough to say, this is not ransom, this is for 500 years of oppression, this is for war damages, this is for economic harm visited on the south of the Philippines for the last 500 years for the different colonial powers that have come through here, from the Spanish to the Japanese to the Americans. Now, this is a reason for you to ignore this conversation. Because in your world, you are not in arguments with people who bring up things from the past that no longer matter. Are you? That's what everybody does. My girlfriend's giving me a hard time about stuff I did in college. We didn't even know each other then. How is that possible? That's what we do as human beings. And we're going back and forth, and we cannot get these guys off this $10 million demand, not one dime. Now, in my book, we have a bargaining system called the Ackerman system. And if I can lead you into bargaining, I'm going to lay some Ackerman on you, and I'm going to get my price. I'm going to get it every time. And it's laid out in a way that works on emotional intelligence and across the board. I mean, it works, just works every time. We layer in tactical empathy, heavy across the board, and we get our price. So I got the young man, we did ransom payments as a sting operation. When I got that 12-year-old boy out of Haiti, the normal ransom demand was anywhere from $25,000 to $125,000. Nobody had ever heard of a ransom for anybody that had been paid for less than $15,000. I got the 12-year-old boy out for $47.51. Odd number pricing. But we got a system that we know works. But we can't get them off to up to 10 mil, not one dime. So I coach my guy, we're going to get a "that's right" out of the sociopath today. You're going to summarize everything he said, especially the parts about us that we don't like. And if you don't feel like you're laying it on thick, you're not laying it on thick enough. And if you do it right, the terrorist is going to say "that's right." I put it in a document, we shared it with the embassy, shared it with the ambassador, got sent to the White House. I thought this was 101. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. We get on the phone with the terrorist. 2 days after I write the document, my guy starts saying, you're not looking for ransom for the American, you're looking for war damages for 500 years of oppression, from the Spanish to the Japanese to the Americans, to the atrocities committed under Black Jack Pershing, to the violation of your fishing rights, for the economic harm for over 500 years of injustices. And you're not Filipinos anyway, you're Moros. You're a separate, independent, moral homeland. You're your own homeland that's currently being dominated by a puppet government in Manila that's propped up by the latest colonial power. And he lays it on thick. And he goes through all of it, and he stops, and the sociopath, the murdering, raping, killing machine on the other side says, "That's right." And he goes silent for a second, and my guy says, "Let's talk again in a couple of days." And he says, "Okay." And we hang up the phone, and the $10 million was gone. The $10 million went away. They never mentioned money again, ever, in the remaining couple of month duration of the kidnapping. Kidnapping took a couple more twists and turns. Through the course of a couple of months, we handled everyone in the exact same fashion. They're asking for non-monetary things, and we kept hitting with tactical empathy, and they became so disorganized and worn out on the other side and effectively gave up that on the Thursday before Easter in April, on Maundy Thursday, the day that Jesus prayed in Gethsemane, our hostage walked away. He just walked away. Their security had loosened up enough to the point that he was sitting out there in the swamp going like, "What am I staying here for?" He walked away. Local farmers saw him walking down a dirt road. They said, "You must be the American." He says, "I am." He'd been in all the papers. They alerted the military. The military flew down and picked him up. They held a giant press conference at the presidential palace in the Philippines. The American has said the president's on one side, Secretary of Defense on the other. Secretary of Defense says, "In a daring rescue operation, we have rescued the American from the Abu Sayyaf. It's a vicious firefight. Many of the terrorists were wounded mortally, and they crawled off into the jungle and died. But as proof of it, here's the American." And he's sitting there. He was there. He's like, and we're like, "Rescue? They gave him a ride." So we flew the American back to the United States, and back in the Philippines, about 3 weeks later, we're working on another kidnapping. I catch up with my guy, and he says, "You're not going to believe who called me." "I don't know. Who called you?" "The terrorist." Still had his undercover phone number, knew him by his undercover name. I'm like, "Really? What'd he say?" He said, "Have you been promoted? I don't know what you said to me on the phone. I was going to kill the American. They should promote you." And he hangs up. Think about what he was really saying when he made that call. What's he saying? And he's saying, "We're good." He's calling because he knows there's a really good chance that they'll talk again, and he wants them to know that we're good. He lost everything, and he called the person that took it from him and said, "We're good. If we would talk again, we can talk. I'm okay." Think about that. That's the way everybody should always be left in every interaction you ever have. Separate how they felt about it from the outcome, and make sure that when they're done, they're willing to say, "We're good. I'd talk to you again." So as you might imagine, as I get ready to finish up, this will require a little bit of preparation. Before we get to that, we got a free newsletter. If it's free, I'll take 3. Immortal words of a federal employee. Text to sign up function. A lot of people get a long, long way on the book and the newsletter alone. Newsletter comes out on Tuesday mornings, short, sweet article, 1 article. It's not one of those newsletters that there's 8 articles, and since you can't decide, you don't read any. There's 1 piece in there, actionable, very specific advice. Tuesday mornings, tee you up for the rest of the week when you're ready to rock and roll after you got Monday behind you. And I said, a lot of people do a lot of good, get a long, long, long way on the book and the newsletter alone. We got a lot of other free content out there. We can get you a long way for nothing. Take advantage of it. text to sign up function, make sure it goes out as all one word. I have FBI and E in the empathy in caps just to make it easier to see. It doesn't have to be caps. It could be lowercase. Just don't let your spell check put a space between FBI and empathy. Your phone is going to try to autocorrect and put a space in there. Don't let it do that. All right, so learning how to say no instead of yes. Any of these getting into that's rights versus your rights, you would imagine it's going to take some preparation. I got a very important video on preparation to show you. It's critical video on preparation. Hopefully it sounds up. It's going to be a little hard to see, but I'll walk you through it.
A proof of life video, that's what they're called. The ultimate good news, bad news story if you're ever unfortunate enough to see one. Today's high-stakes rescue mission in Colombia ended a drama that has been dragging on for years. Chris Voss is the former FBI lead international kidnapping negotiator, and he worked on the...
All right, it's a little hard to see, but can anybody see what my preparation issues are here? Yeah, hair sticking out the side of my head. Now, this is the first time I ever got a chance to be on CNN at all, let alone being on Anderson Cooper. And I just got out of the bureau. I'm excited. I mean, this is cool. I get to talk to the media. Nobody's going to get in my way. I get to be on Anderson Cooper. There are going to be more people watch this than in the town I grew up in. I grew up in a small town in Iowa. So I'm really curious. I mean, I don't know about all this stuff, this media stuff. For example, one of the things I'm curious about is I'd heard they have a green room. Do they have a green room? And is it green? Because I'm from Iowa. In Iowa, if you got a green room in your house, that baby's going to be green. We're very practical people. So I want to know if they have a green room with CNN and is it green? Well, they have a green room and it's not green. But what are you going to do? The media, right? So I found out the green room's not actually green. You know where you go after you go to the green room? Makeup, exactly. And I had never worn makeup before. And I remember sitting in a chair and that pretty lady's putting makeup on my face, and I'm thinking, my father is rolling over in his grave right now. He never thought his son, Midwestern blue-collar guy from Iowa, his son's wearing makeup. So after you go to makeup, a number of you have done this. You know, you probably don't go into the studio. You go into a room, which is actually a large, dark closet. Small room, large dark closet. They got a light shines right in your eyes. You look right at the light. They say, look at the light. That's the camera. That's talking to Anderson. And down to the left is a monitor. And they say, the monitor will go live when we go live. Do you want it off or on? Because you're going to see the live programming. And I said, leave it on. I never saw me on CNN before. I want to watch me on CNN. Leave that baby on. So we've just gone live, and the monitor has gone on, and I'm looking down, and I can see that my hair is sticking out. And clearly I'm perplexed. And the worst part, the monitor's a mirror image. I don't know which side of my head the hair is sticking out. But I'm a negotiator. I operate under pressure. I find out what the possibilities are. I generate options. I can handle pressure. So the first thing I got to do is I got to see if I can figure out which side of my head the hair is sticking out. So
this case from the beginning until his retirement just last year. He joins me now. Chris, this has got to be kind of...
For some reason, I thought move my head around and make my hair shake, and be able to isolate it. You see from the look on my face, I'm thinking like, no, that didn't exactly work. So I'm trying to decide what to do, right? Like you or me, what do you move? You probably can't go like this because you look like one of the Three Stooges, and you probably what if it doesn't stay down? You can't really lick your hand to make sure it stays down. Get a lot of saliva on your hand. That's not going to work. But you got to make a move, right? Because people are watching. The pressure's mounting. CNN, Anderson Cooper.
A remarkable day for you to be so...
His hair's perfect. That's not a fair comparison shot. I know. The producer went, hey, go split screen. Let's make everybody see for sure that Voss's hair is messed up. Anderson Cooper could be in a hurricane, his hair wouldn't move. So now, and I can see this coming up. Now I'm looking at him, there's a little extra snarl on my face as soon as I see this. So now I'm feeling the pressure. I gotta make a move. This is like that kid's jump rope game with 2 ropes. Where you're like, when can I jump? When can I go? I gotta get in. I gotta make a move. My mother's friends are gonna call her on a phone and say your son can't comb his hair. So I get ready to make my move.
closely involved in this and to finally
You see this sinking feeling coming over my face, a look of realization.
see it come to fruition.
Damn it. All right, so what's the point? What's the point? The point is, they didn't ban me from CNN because I made one mistake. A little bit of the question, is what's the straw that breaks the camel's back? No individual mistake is going to cause things to derail. Approach people with respect, taking the time to exercise an understanding of them, the environment, the challenges, the things that they're faced with. Let them know they've been heard. You'll accelerate the outcome, and every single time you do that, whether or not you make a deal with somebody, or whether or not they're just a loved one in your life that matters, they're always going to look at you and say, we're good. We can still talk. And that's where you want to lead people. All right, thanks for sitting through all of this.